If I could choose to live inside a storybook, it would hands down be A Time to Keep by Tasha Tudor. I always longed to create these memories that she made with her children on the pages that highlight every single month the special things that they would do as a family. And every once in a while, we get to do something that looks a little bit something like that, and that would be October. Her and her family got together and they picked apples and made apple cider, which I'm not going to be doing that, but we did go to an apple farm and harvest a lot of apples. And I'm going to show you 3 things that I'm going to be turning our harvest into. So come along with me. Last Saturday, I decided that I wanted to go to this local apple farm that you can pick from if there are apples available and nobody has adopted the tree. But they had all been harvested. We were a little too late, so we were kind of wandering around aimlessly, looking pretty forlorn, when a really sweet man named Mr. Berry asked, "Are you guys looking for apples?" And I said, yes. He invited us to pick from his personal tree and to take as many as we'd like, which was so generous and so sweet. And so that's what we did. And it was such a fun experience to get to do with the whole family, and knowing that we were going to be able to go home and be able to turn these into some yummy treats to enjoy for the next couple of weeks. You want more? And after we had gotten just so many apples, it was time to take them home so we could think of what we were going to make with them. And we made several things. It's an entire week after we first picked our apples, and I finally have sort of a quiet moment this morning to be able to put everything together to make what I planned, which is I'm planning on making applesauce and apple pie filling, and I'm going to show you how to make apple cider vinegar. But first and foremost, I'm going to have to process all of these apples by peeling them and coring them, and I'm so thankful to have this tool here. If you are planning on going on an endeavor like this, I guarantee you're going to want this, because last year I saw it and it was like $30. Who needs $30 to peel an apple? After a couple of hours of peeling apples and coring them and slicing them all by myself, I was like, you know what, from now on I'm gonna go immediately with that tool. And I did, and I've been using it just to cut up random slices of apples for the kids ever since, because it's so easy peasy. And I love that when you take it off, it makes this cute little springy apple, like a little coil. That's so fun. I needed more room, so I moved over here to continue to process all of these apples. And as you can see, I have a bowl for the discards of the apple peels and apple cores. And I'm going to be showing you how easy it is to be making apple cider vinegar. I know that it's something that is very healthy for us. It's a fermented food. It's not hard to do, and I think people get really intimidated when it comes to that. So I can't wait to show you just how simple and easy it is. I'm going to go ahead and fill up a giant kettle that I have for canning up with water so that I can go ahead and get some jars sanitized before I start putting the apple peels in them. I want to give the jars a really good scrub down and rinse before I put them in to be sanitized, because you never know, even if you're buying them off the shelf, what kind of residue is in there, and it's really important when doing canning or any kind of fermentation that you have sterile equipment, because you don't want any weird bacteria to grow into it. Now that I have my hot water ready, I'm going to try to submerge the jar. This is a half gallon, so it's kind of bigger than my pot would like, so I'm going to try to get all the air bubbles out if I'm able to, and let it sit for a few minutes. While I'm waiting for my jars to sanitize, I'm going to go ahead and process the rest of these apples. And you may notice that some of them have some yucky spots or what looks like maybe some worm damage, and I just want to encourage you that that is actually okay. When you're using organic, unsprayed apples, it's not uncommon for them to have a little bit of pest pressure. And that doesn't mean that they're inedible or unusable, especially if they're going to be cooked. Now, if you find a worm inside, maybe you'd feel a certain type of way, but none of these had worms in them. They had just maybe had a little worm tunnel, and I just would pull a little bit of that part off and not use that part. But it's not uncommon. I think we're so used to seeing picture perfect apples and vegetables and fruit when we go to the grocery store that we've kind of lost touch with what fruit and vegetables actually look like when we grow them in our gardens or pick them off a tree. And this is really, really healthy fruit. Now that the jars are clean, let's get down to making some apple cider vinegar. I love how easy it is to make apple cider vinegar, and I love that it's making use of something that you wouldn't normally want to consume, but it turns it into something that is absolutely beneficial and helpful to you in your kitchen and your family. And you just take your cores, take a mixture of your cores and your peels, and you just start filling up your jar. And like I said, this is a half-gallon jar that I'm using. You could probably do this in any size jar. I just think it's easier to make more at once than smaller batches. Then when you get it filled up to your desired, I do it about a couple of inches from the top. I take 2 cups of water, warm water at a time, and add 2 tablespoons of sugar into it and stir it till it dissolves. Then I add it into the jar. For me, for this half-gallon jar, it seems to take about 4.5 cups of water to get filled to the top. I'm going to fill it to this fill line right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a glass fermentation weight on top of there to keep the peels from coming above the water, up out of the water. That's what I do, because you don't want it to come to the top or it'll get bacteria maybe or moldy. And then you put a cheesecloth over the top, and I just screw the band for the jar over it so that it's breathable and can ferment. And you'll leave it in your pantry, in a dark pantry or a dark cupboard, something, for about 2 weeks, and you'll come back and check on it, and it should smell a little bit soury. It should smell a little bit vinegary. What you'll do at that point is you will strain off the liquid and discard your the apple peels and cores and such. Then you'll put your lid on again, and you'll let it sit for about 4 more weeks or so until it gets gets to that vinegary, tangy taste. And you can taste it at that point. If it's to the level you want it, you can leave it for longer. But it's super easy. And when it's done, when I'm done with this batch, I'll come back and I will show you how it turned out. I ended up being able to make 4 half-gallon jugs of the apple cider vinegar starter. Now this is a vinegar that I have already made a while ago, and I'm going to show you something really cool that will happen when you make your own. If you're new to vinegar or fermentation, think of like kombucha or something like that. What the vinegar does is it creates what's called a mother, and that is a really healthy part of the fermentation process, and it's full of lots of enzymes and amazing things that you need for your gut health. So I'm gonna actually, for this last batch, I'm gonna add a couple of tablespoons of my previous vinegar in there just to see if it makes it work a little bit faster or not, but it can't hurt it. So I'm just gonna do that for an experiment. And then I will show you what the mother of this particular vinegar looks like. It's very weird. It's like a jellyfish. I know it looks kind of funky, but it's just a little clear gelatin kind of film that films on top of it, and it's not bad. It doesn't mean it's moldy. So if you see that, don't freak out. It's supposed to have that. I'm going to go ahead and juice a lemon because I'm going to need lemon juice for both the applesauce and the apple pie filling. So I want to have that ready and on hand when I start making that. I'm going to go ahead and start with the apple pie filling. And so I'm just going to cut the apples into halves since it's already sliced up thanks to that handy dandy tool I had. And I'm putting about 2 pounds of apples into here, and it's really going to make actually just a small batch of apple pie filling, not a big deal. It's not going to keep me through the whole year or anything, but you know, every little bit helps, and it's a skill that you can learn, and that's what's important. I think people get discouraged to start because they think they have to do a huge amount of canning, and that they should be filling up their entire pantry with one session, and that's just not realistic for a lot of people. For this recipe, I'm going to put in a half a cup of sugar over my apples. Then I'm going to put 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and then a teaspoon of cinnamon, which I pretty much had like no more cinnamon left in that, so I just put the rest in. And then I put about a half a teaspoon of nutmeg in. Now that everything is in the pot, I turn on the heat, and I am going to be stirring it around, getting it really incorporated and letting it just really come together. And you're gonna let that come to a boil, and even though you're not adding much liquid besides the lemon juice, the liquid from the apples will kind of come out as it starts, the heat starts to release that. So it'll boil a little bit in the bottom. And then once it does that, you're going to want to turn the heat down just a little bit to about medium, and then let it simmer for about 5 minutes. And while you're kind of stirring it continuously. Once it's done, you're going to want to ladle it into your sanitized and hot jars and go ahead and get that put in, and then you're going to want to put your lids and your bands on so that you can process it. For this particular recipe, you are going to want to process it for about 20 minutes. As you can see, when I said this was a small batch, it's only making me about 2 to maybe 3, it made me 3 jars total of the apple pie filling, which is fine. That's enough to have some good treats, make some yummy wintertime deliciousness. So I'm excited for that. And you always want to make sure that the air bubbles in the sides of your jars are not there by using a little tool kind of like this. I'm going to go ahead and band and put the lids on the apple pie filling, but I'm going to wait to process it with the applesauce. So for the applesauce, you are going to want to quarter all of your apples. So that's what I'm going to do, and add them all in together. And for this recipe, it recommended using about 6 pounds of apples. I, at this point, only had about 4. So it's going to be a much smaller batch than would be a normal size. And I'm going to have to kind of adjust the measurements for the sugar and water, and but it should make a couple of jars at least. I used about 1/3 and a half of a third, so what is that, 1/6 of a cup of sugar, and I used 1/4 of a cup of water, and then a half of a 4th cup, which is like, what is that, 1/8? I'm so bad at fractions. But I did that because I had to kind of guesstimate the percentages and stuff. And then you want to put your apples and the water and the sugar, and you're going to give it a good stir, and you're going to bring it to a boil, and then you're going to turn the heat down to like between medium and low, and you're going to let it simmer for about 25 minutes, and you're going to just stir it occasionally. Just make sure it's not sticking to the bottom, but I only stirred it about twice in that time. And then it was done and ready to be ladled into your hot jars to be processed. And since I'm doing the applesauce and the apple pie together, I'm actually going to do it for the 30 minutes that is required for the apple pie filling. The applesauce only requires 20 minutes of processing, but it can't really hurt it to go just a little bit over, so I'm just going to do them all together at once. Now that it's done, I'm going to put it here on my counter. I'm going to let it cool down probably for 24 hours to make sure that the seals are as they should be. I love to hear that little pop noise that it makes as it starts to cool and it creates that seal. I'm really thankful that I was able to have this time to myself this morning to get this done. Just a couple of hours of mom alone time, and I know that it's going to benefit us not only today, but in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. And it feels so encouraging to be able to use all the parts of the apples. I'm really excited about all these jars of apple cider vinegar. It's always fun to see them as they start fermenting and creating the mother. And let me know, have you ever attempted to make it yourself? I feel like I accomplished my Tasha Tudor fantasy for the week. It's these simple moments that we find joy, celebrating nature's bounty and making something with our hands. Have a wonderful week, you guys.